Hey friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you a recommendations video. I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 favorite spooktacular books. Ironically enough, when I was writing this list, I have 5 adults and 5 young adults. A little bit for everybody, regardless of if you like young adult or adult, a little less creepy, a little more creepy. Most of these err on the side of thriller because that's what I like to read. So let's start with the young adult. The first one I'm going to talk about is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a series that I do not get to talk about enough on my channel, but that I love so deeply. It is a 4-book series. It's compared to Criminal Minds. It's fantastic. Well, 5 teenagers who are recruited by the FBI for this special program called the Naturals program. And these 5 teenagers have above average natural type of gifts. So they're not full-blown superpowers, but they're definitely very developed, specific powers. We follow mainly Cassie, whose mom goes missing prior to beginning the book, and so she only wants to join this Naturals program because she thinks it's going to help her find her mom. And then throughout the course of the series, you follow her on that journey, as well as each individual book follows its own murder mystery. First and the 4th book in the series is incredible, and I love these so much, and they are so underrated. Like, BookTube does not give this series enough credit. If you like thrillers, this is something that you absolutely have to pick up. The second one for my YA category is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins, which is a romance, contemporary meets thriller type of novel. There is a pretty significant romance component to this one because it is Stephanie Perkins, but then there is also like this scream slasher 1980s horror film moment to it as well. This is a book that I was up in very late hours of the night reading by myself in the dark, and that probably wasn't the best decision because I was constantly like thinking I was hearing things in the house because this book makes you kind of a little paranoid while you're reading it. The thriller aspects of this are incredible. I don't much care for the romance aspects. I think it could have done with less of the romance, but for a thriller, for YA, I was pretty impressed with this. The next one on my list here is actually a very recent read, and that is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is the first book in a trilogy, and we follow this young girl named Stevie who goes to a boarding school for especially gifted teenagers, and she specifically wants to go to this boarding school because in the 30s, there was this very famous murder kidnapping that happened to the owners of the boarding school's family. It's an unsolved case, and it's her mission in life to solve the case and figure out what happened to this family. Only the first book in the series is out, so I can't speak to like obviously the series as a whole. It's kind of a slower paced mystery, and it doesn't focus too heavily on like the mystery aspect. There's a pretty good contemporary timeline running through it as well. So if you are someone who wants a little dose of the thriller aspect, but you don't like really intense things, this is something I'd recommend because it's on the lighter side. Even a little bit of like Clue vibes. They figure out who done it and how all these moving pieces work in this crime from the 30s. I'm excited for the next one. It comes out in January. The next one on my list is one of my favorite books of 2018, and that is The Accidental Bad Girl by Maxine Kaplan. This is something I would compare very heavily to The Female Species by Minnie McGinnis. It's this incredible thriller mixed with a social commentary novel. It's at a boarding school, and this girl sleeps with her best friend's boyfriend. As a result, she gets accidentally involved in this local drug ring. It just like snowballs from there. Also has some fantastic commentary about rape and sexual assault and the rape culture. I would say this one's very thrilling. Actually, I don't think there's any actual murder in it. I think it's just a lot of thrilling suspense, chase scenes. It's really fantastic. And if you liked The Female Species, I highly recommend this. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely loved it. And the final recommendation I have for the YA category, of course, is the Diviner series by Libba Bray. This is a fantastical historical fiction paranormal amazingness, and the audiobooks are incredible. It takes place in the 1920s, and it has to do with kids with superpowers and a lot of ghost encounters, a lot of like paranormal stuff going on. There's a cast of characters, but the first one focuses a lot on Evie, and she's the first character you're introduced to, and she is moving from Ohio to New York to stay with her uncle at this really creepy museum of the occult. There's so much more to it than just like a paranormal historical fiction. So much good commentary on socioeconomics of the time, of the race issues of the time. So next, let's talk about my 5 favorite adult thrillers. These ones are obviously much more graphic, much more brutal, have many, many more trigger warnings to come along with them. The adult ones are not for the faint of heart. I'm going to start off with Gillian Flynn and Gone Girl. This is probably one of the first adult murder mysteries I ever read. It was quite the introduction. I don't feel like I need to go too much into like the plot line of this book. Gillian Flynn is such a fantastic thriller author. Just her plot twists and the grotesque, dark, disturbing nature of her stories. It's just like, this is actually the first one that I read by her, but it's my second favorite of her works. My first favorite, and actually the next one on this list, is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. So good and so underrated, and has like the worst adaptation of the 3, which is so sad. We follow a woman who is the sole survivor of her family massacre, aside from her brother, who is in prison because he is accused and was found guilty of the murder. Had to live her whole life with the fact that the only surviving member of her family murdered the rest of her family. She's approached so many years after the crime by this online sleuthing community who is trying to prove her brother's innocence. She gets dragged back to her hometown to help solve this web sleuthing community's theory that her brother is actually innocent and find the real killer of her family. So many shocking plot twists. Of the 3 that I've read, this was the one that was like, what? That's saying a lot. All of Gillian Flynn's work is like that. Every time you read one of her books, you're just like shocked that people could behave in such a way. This one is my favorite by far. The next 2 on my list are both from another female author, and the first one is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This is my closest recommendation for those of you who really like Gillian Flynn and don't have any more books to read by her. Karen Slaughter's work is equally creepy, is equally unsettling and dark and twisted and disturbing as Gillian Flynn's, and she has a lot more works for you to work your way through. Pretty Girls especially is my favorite of the 2 that I've read. These 2 sisters, their youngest sister is murdered when they are children, and it really creates this huge divide between them. One goes on to marry a very wealthy businessman in Atlanta with her husband one night. Her husband is attacked by a random stranger and ends up dying as a result of the attack. Somehow becomes connected to another murder that took place days prior of a girl who looks very similar, cases very similar to their sister from 20 some years ago. And it brings the 2 sisters back together, and they're on this epic quest trying to solve their sister's murder, this current murder. You think you have one theory and you think it's right, and then it's not, and then you come back and you're like, dang, I was right. And it's just, it is a wild, wild ride. Definitely the more grotesque of the 2 that I've read by her. The other one I recommend is The Good Daughter. This one follows a woman whose mother and older sister were brutally attacked and murdered when she was a teen, and she's had to kind of grow up always with this burden that she ran away and left her mother and sister behind. Several years down the road, something happens that is forcing her to relive that very traumatic day. It's really hard to describe Karen Slaughter's books because there's always so many good plot twists. I just love the way she writes sister dynamics and family dynamics and husband-wife dynamics and how complicated all these things are. She's one of my new favorite mystery thriller writers. She has a new book that just came out in August that I'm going to be getting my hands on as soon as I can, because I'm dying to read it. That one sounds equally as exciting and thrilling. Say hello, Libby. Say hello, Libby. And the last adult book I have to recommend is An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina. This is her most recent release, and this one I would say is the least shocking of all the adult books that I've mentioned. It's the least graphic and brutal. This one feels very, very heavily of Clue. Your setting is this hotel that is very remote in a snowy mountain retreat area. The power goes out. These people are stranded. They cannot leave. There is a blizzard. They go to sleep. They wake up the next morning and one of the guests is dead. Initially, it's believed to be an accidental death. When a second hotel guest is murdered, everybody really starts to lose their shiznit. Like I said, they're stranded. There are no phones, there is no power, there is no leaving this hotel, and there is a murderer amongst them, and they are trying to figure out the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. This one really heavily felt like Clue. If you've seen the movie Clue, it felt a lot like that. I really enjoyed this one. It's a classic like whodunit type of novel. Can you hear my cats in the litter box right now? You're being super distracting. What was I saying? Like I was saying, this is what I recommend for somebody who doesn't want the super grotesque, bloody, gory, descriptive crimes, but wants a really fun mystery that they can try to solve as the characters move along throughout the story and guess the plot twist. One of those mysteries where I figured it out about 10 pages before it was revealed, so it wasn't until the very last minute, so I felt smart, but not too smart for the book. It's never a fun time to figure out the murderer within like the first 10 pages. When you figure it out right before it's revealed, you're like, I'm so smart. So those are my top 10 spooktacular recommendations for Halloween for the fall time if you just want a good thriller mystery read. If you've read them, tell me in the comments down below and we can chat about them. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.